Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamualaikum. Ji ayanu pakhair ragale ni hao chunashumme washmale. Ohio Gonzaimas, Guten Morgen, hola, bonjour, privyet, kaifa hal? Hale shuma chatore, ahlan wa sahlan, marhaba. Buna, mucho, gracias, swabi, balli kare aaya, hosh gal den nayo sayo. Khuya mora chi vatto chi hal yud kali mera khairutan. A very warm welcome to everybody who's tuned into PTV World and are watching World this morning on a fresh, fine Monday morning over here in Islamabad alongside me. I'm very lucky that I've been joined by my very well-learned colleague who happens to be Miss Hajar Satti. I happen to be Shahzad Hasan Khan, and we hope and pray that everybody out there is doing wonderfully well and that you're ready to kickstart your day with us. But first things first, hello Hajar, assalamu alaikum. How are you feeling today?
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Jazakallah khair, for introducing me. Today happens to be 2nd of September and sun is glazing in its glory, so we do feel a transition because for the past couple of weeks we were having constant rainfall in Islamabad, and I think temperature has really, or mercury has really dropped in. But again, I think the mercury is slowly and gradually rising again. But having said so, this is the beauty of Islamabad, and I think we are witnessing the transition from summer into the autumn season, right?
Yeah.
Because you feel there is a change in the flora and the fauna of Islamabad, and with that you also change some sort of so you feel some sort of change in your I think skin too, right? Because there's some sort of dryness that is coming on.
Yep.
But I think that is the beauty of Islamabad, and that is why we admire living in Islamabad, and this is one of the, I would say, underrated rahmat that we are enjoying of Allah. So thank you so much, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But having said so, it is 2nd of September, so it is also it's an important day for the Vietnam, and I think, Shahzad, why don't you take the
Exactly. So, ladies and gentlemen, on 2nd September, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam is actually celebrating their National Day, and I believe that, that for everybody who's out there, I think it's, because whenever we are to kind of speak about Vietnam, they make sure that, that they have better diplomatic ties with the rest of the world. And not just that, nowadays, bilateral trade relations between the two countries, talking about Vietnam and Pakistan, emerges as one of the most outstanding fields of the cooperation. The two-way trade volume between Vietnam and Pakistan reached $705 million in 2023, and within the first 6 months of 2024, this volume is approximately at $402 million. And in his National Day message to Mr. Salahuddin Chaudhary, Pakistani former ambassador to Vietnam, Mr. Tuan, talked about 79 years of efforts of Vietnamese people towards national independence. In the last 40 years of renovation period, Vietnam developed diplomatic relations with 193 countries, comprehensive strategic partnership with 6, strategic partnership with 17, and comprehensive partnership with 13 countries. Pakistan and Vietnam has 52 years of diplomatic relations, and the friendship will continue to prosper. And that's what we hope for as well. So to all of those Vietnamese people who are out there, you're celebrating the National Day of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. Congratulations to all of you, and Pakistani people look forward to such diplomatic ties. What a great day to get started with.
That's very true, and we have the Vietnamese ambassador here on our studio for I think a couple of times, and we've spoken about passionately about the country and its rise to power, and how through those ashes of the war and extreme downtroddenness that the country went through, how it rose in, and I think we have a lot to learn from the countries like Vietnam. But now moving forward and now going on to unrolling what sort of conversation we want to develop in our first segment, and that is hinged around the concept of the inclusion and diversity. So these are the buzzwords, these are the terms that are used a lot in the contemporary era, in the academic studies, in the social discourses, on the media discourses. And when we delve into the concept of the diversity, when we talk about inclusion, I think we are particularly going to focus on the financial inclusion, but we are obviously going to talk about it. But I think with respect to the environment that we are having, the weather patterns that are changing, and the sort of cyclone, the storm that was going to hit the Karachi, we also want to have this discussion early in this morning. So Shahzad, why don't you take the lead?
Exactly. So obviously, I think that for everybody who's out there, since you were speaking about weather as well, I think there's another westerly wave which is going to enter in the country, and that too from 2nd of September, in terms of whenever we are to speak about rains and floodings as well. So I think there needs to be people out there who they need to keep a good watch. Please make sure that you have a neighborhood watch as well, and if there's such a thing, please make sure that that you kind of speak with the authorities as well. But not just that, I think in addition to this, what we certainly need to talk about today over here is the rain spells which are going to take place in coming days as well. So there is situation report as of now provides an update on the ongoing monsoon rain conditions in various parts of Pakistan, highlighting the predicted impacts, damages and relief efforts carried out by the government and humanitarian organizations. Further updates will also be provided as the situation evolves. Now, speaking of the highlight, the ongoing 2024 monsoon season has caused significant devastation across Pakistan, particularly in the provinces of Balochistan, Punjab and Sindh. Heavy rains have resulted in widespread flooding, landslides and infrastructure damage. As of August 29, 2024, the country has seen above average rainfall. Unusually high temperatures have exacerbated the situation, accelerating snow melt in regions like Upper KP, Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. The National Disaster Management Authority reports that as of August 29, 250 people have died across the country, including 125 children. Additionally, 461 people have been injured, 182 of whom are children. The floods have damaged 4,889 houses and there has been significant infrastructure damages of bridges and roads. The National Disaster Management Authority continues to monitor and record the extent of the damage to assist in coordinated response efforts. So this is an unfortunate insight on the recent rainfalls that have caused a lot of devastation in the country, and we certainly hope and pray that the local governments are going to come together. The public-private partnership will help people in making sure that they are going to find a safer place to move towards as well. And from 2nd of September, there's going to be another spell. So everybody, please watch out. Make sure that you guys stand together in these tough times. Unfortunately for us, that almost every year we have to go through this as well. But this is the havoc of climate change, and it is for real.
And now rolling back the conversation back to the concept called financial inclusion. What does that mean? How it is linked with the youth empowerment, women empowerment, and how can we make sure that there is a financial inclusion, especially in the peripheries of the countries when we talk about this invisible labor that is going on in the field, in the agricultural area, and how can we make sure that their presence is also recorded in the GDP of the country. So without any further ado, we are very glad that we have been joined by two very vibrant ladies in the studio who are going to enlighten us on the concept of the financial inclusion and what is its correlation with the empowerment. We are very glad that we have been joined by Anza Akhnot. She happens to be an analyst. Assalamu alaikum, Anza, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much for the warm welcome.
It's a pleasure having you. And joining Anza, we are very glad that we have been joined by Minhal Suleiman. She happens to be a technology consultant. Assalamu alaikum, Minhal, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thank you so much, Hajra. Thank you so much, Rajat.
It's wonderful to have you over here, like always, to speak about such amazing topics, which certainly are the need of the time as well. Talking about financial inclusion, that too in the perspective of diversity, and not just that, I think in the perspective of youngsters and women as well, is something that we need it. Our economy needs it as well. But first things first, I think, because Anza happens to be the policy advisor and analyst herself, why do you think financial inclusion, I know it, I mean, I sound really dumb asking this question, but for the audiences out there, why is financial inclusion important for any economy to grow?
So I'm going to break it down into something really simple. So, women are more than 50% of your workforce, right? However, if we talk about, let's say, businesses and women-led businesses, out of all the businesses that are registered, even within the SMEs, SMB sector, small and medium industries, only 1% are owned by women. Why is that the case? Because a lot of these women, like you mentioned, the invisible labor class, they're working, they are probably bringing in money, but they do not have access to either registered NICs, and that entails them not having access to financial services like banks, like a lot of the other digital wallets.
You're deprived of all of these services.
So micro loans, credit cards, any of those things. So it is very important to bring them into the financial net as well. There are a lot of, you must have heard the concept of, let's say, doctor brides. So there are a lot of young people, young women who are educated, skilled, knowledgeable, who are sitting and they're not actually financially contributing to the economy.
True.
So there's a waste of resource because we just haven't given them that access.
But Anza, when you are saying that's a waste of resource, aren't you downgrading the role that they are playing, in terms of upbringing their kids, right? I think motherhood is a very important job. It's a very tough job. Again, it's an invisible labor because no one is, counting it in terms of, money or capitalist, whatever the value in, right? So how do you, when we talk about the inclusion, right? So I think motherhood is equally as important.
Absolutely. Being a homemaker is equally important, and hats off to all the mothers But I grew up with a working mother as well.
Right.
I think we grew up just fine, and I think because of the economic condition in the world today, you know, world over, I see a lot of women that are not prepared for when a catastrophe hits. You know, Shahzad just mentioned hundreds that have passed away today. What about those men who have passed away and the women there don't even have a bank account to actually feed their children? So yes, it's lovely being an exemplary mother, but to contribute, you know, look at the school fees these days, you know, the cost of diapers and everything, you know, so to give children that quality life, you don't have to step out of the house.
Just
I see so many women that
Yeah.
are working out of the comfort of their homes, and that is why technology is so important. And linking up, you know, the intersection of financial inclusion and technology, there are a lot of women that have digital services that they can provide.
And thank you so much for highlighting, you know, the role that
Yeah.
it needs to play, and you know what financial inclusion will do. Because just yesterday, I was at a petrol pump and I asked him for a juice box as well, and I didn't know that the small juice box is now 90 rupees.
Yes.
You know, so I was like, hey, really? You know what? And a
Oh,
juice
really?
bottle was 290 rupees. I was like, wow. I mean, we need to ask these questions. But now let's move on to Minhal. Minhal, the question stays that when we are to speak about capacity building, because it's more about capacity building, unfortunately, when men evolve, you know, their wives do not, because, you know, they're so busy working. What happens is that eventually there will be a lag, and the understanding will certainly be gone or thrown away out of the windows. Now, when we speak about capacity building in the context of financial inclusion, what do you have in your mind?
I believe, Shahzad, it's a very, very interesting question. One of the things is when you talk about women evolving, it has a lot of work to be done on social conditioning.
True.
Because there are certain roles to be expected by men, and there are certain roles conventionally expected by women.
True.
But I think with time things are evolving. Same roles are evolving, and I believe in every single household, it's not one man job. Everyone has to contribute to make a better living. It's not survival you can do at any time, but it's a role of having a better quality of life.
Exactly.
So we are focusing on financial inclusion not only for women but also for the youth, because we take pride as Pakistanis. We've been listening that, you know, we have the largest youth in Pakistan, but unfortunately this youth is aging now.
Yeah.
We have to take into account that unless you do not empower them in terms of finances, in terms of their capacity building, this youth will not be able to contribute when
And
they
probably
are
in
not
next 20-30 years, we'll have more elderly people than the
exactly.
youngsters.
This is very
yes.
alarming. See, the thing is that look at in next 15 years, there will be either two young people, less than 10 years old,
True.
and then there will be more than like
30 plus.
35, 30 plus. So now is the right time. Now is the right time to in fact invite international players, empower your local vendors, and provide a right platform. Not only for a reason I emphasize on the technology, because that is the thing which can evolve the things in a matter of days rather than waiting for decades
And
or
thank you
years.
so much for contributing towards this discussion. Now, Anza, moving to you, because in your conversation you highlighted a very important point, and when you touch on the social inclusion or the financial inclusion, you cannot discount the fact that how much CNIC numbers, the role they play in this regard, right? So when we talk about these social safety nets, right, that are there by the government, sponsored by the states, for example, there is Benazir income support programs, right? Through that, you know, a lot of women can go towards this process where they can enroll themselves in the NADRA and get their CNIC. Do you believe that such sort of incentives can actually empower women when we talk about the financial inclusion? What role do you see, and do you feel that there is a leakages in these structures in the system? How can we
Beautiful
overcome
Yes,
this?
so
question.
that's a lovely
True.
question. So I'm going to highlight you know, a couple of points here. Number one, yes, these are brilliant initiatives on the part of the government as well, but the private sector also now needs to understand that the government has a certain capacity. Yes, they're taking care of the social cohesion part, but let's say the technology aspect needs to be brought in, the expertise need to be brought in from you know, the technocrats that are present. So for instance, the BISP is a great program, but and they're probably the ones with the most you know, sane data repository that's out there.
All right.
But there are still a lot of people that are not within that net. Yes, it's a great initiative because now men, you know, earlier it was only like finances are tied to power, right? So especially within the village structures, the rural areas, men do not want their women, you know, women in the house to have a registered NIC or a registered phone number and anything. That's a cultural aspect. But now because of BISP, we've seen a lot of men that are encouraging women because
Yeah.
there's money coming in.
True.
Also,
They do not want the money to come into their bank accounts.
bank
They're
accounts.
like,
And
it's
then
going
see-
into my wife's account. Yeah.
Yeah, so the technology aspect is important here because I've done a lot of work on ground and we noticed that even women that are receiving the money from this do not know how to access it. For
Yeah.
instance, even a lot of young people who are getting trained by the government, like free courses in education, in let's say data science, in graphic designing, something as
Yeah.
simple. So they're getting all this information, but then they don't even know how to use an ATM.
True.
So how
And-
are you going to use
and I'm
that
going to-
money? How are you going to invest
I'm going to
it?
share an example over here. So, just a couple of years ago, ladies and gentlemen, there was this health service which actually came out, and people were given these cards. And imagine, that the director of that health service came to our show and said that people were putting those cards into ATMs, that
Yeah.
thinking that money will come out. Now, in addition to this, because you've touched upon the cultural aspect as well, I'm going to move on to Minhal as well, and that is, now imagine I have a lot of businessmen in my house, alhamdulillah. Some of them are wholesalers, some of them do import and export and whatnot. But what I see the most is that they do not operate with bank accounts, and it's a choice to not operate with bank accounts. So let alone the women and the youngsters, even grown-up men, they're millionaires and they do a lot of work.
Is
They
there
a lot
any
of
hidden reason behind that?
a lot of money business. So one, obviously, having a bank account means that you will be a TaxNet member, first of all. Number two, because people choose that there will be so many service charges and whatnot, and people will get to know about how much money we are making, there's always a reluctancy in going into or financial inclusion. So what should we do about all of those people who still think the same way?
Or I believe it's a very interesting question, and that is why I believe in long term we can see a very major dent in our economy, because the thing is, it's about the value proposition. Because yes, this businessman is not representing a certain percentage. It's a very niche market. Yes, they are there, but not the masses. So
Okay.
what our plan is for the masses. The thing is, and in fact, Adra, you also spoke about the BISP. It's a very good program, but still, what I believe in is that we should be making our people self-sufficient rather than spoon-feeding them.
True.
And these sort of programs are really good, but they are in the end spoon-feeding them. In the same program, you can enable and educate those same women for which you have the data,
True.
that these are the sort of educational programs you're having for a certain age bracket. So it's easier for them to grow in that aspect rather
Yeah.
than just having money every
And
month.
I think that what has contributed towards financial inclusion is your mobile number. It's
Yes.
very easy. Your mobile number is your account number. Anybody can
Exactly.
do you Easy Pesa and Jazz Cash and whatnot.
Exactly,
So do you think all of these tools have actually helped us? Do you think that with digital economy, people are getting to where we needed them to be?
I believe the pace is very much there, but there is a lot of focus by the government. Why a focus on public-private partnerships? Because all these fintechs are operating at their own level.
Yeah.
They do not have any support from the government, because the government has a lot of power in terms of data and kind of reinforcement which they can do at the mass level.
True.
So this is the area where we want to focus, that not only on the fintechs, they should be taken to the areas far-flung where a lot of areas we were doing our research work, that they do not have the access to simple ATM. The ATMs are really 150 kilometers far away. They have to take a drive. So
Even a conventional bank
Conventional
in
bank,
Balochistan. We've
exactly.
seen so many areas where we were trying to get some conventional banks over there. And people have to drive, I think, 200 kilometers
exactly.
just to even, extract their pension. So there's
Yeah.
no bank.
And Ansa, you mentioned a very important point, and I think Shehzad also touched on a very important point in between the conversation, that is the intersection of technology and when we talk about financial inclusion. So usually when we're talking about financial inclusion, I think people who are living in the urban areas, yes, they are already included in that system. We can further develop that conversation, but when we are talking about people, the core which is living in the rural areas, right, who are underprivileged, who are may not have the access towards the banking system, and these are very formal sort of structures, right? They might not be very comfortable going there, operating out there. Maybe their financial literacy is not, at par with operating those systems, right? So when we talk about the underprivileged communities, marginalized communities, what are some of the latest researches that you have done? And when we talk about Pakistan, so for example, one community that comes into my mind, and I do feel that they are really invisible labor, is the Khana Badosh or the nomad communities,
Yeah.
right? Because they're constantly moving around the country, and that is why they're not given the CNIC, because what will be their permanent address? They do not have any permanent address, right? So
Yeah.
how can we make sure that they are also financially included and they're part of the economy, and the invisible labor which goes in, rearing the cattle is also included and made part of the GDP of the country?
Yes, 100%. That's very valid. So when I was, I'll share a personal story. I was in the Kailash Valley a couple of months ago, and I was amazed to see that even those women who are selling handicrafts, Kailashi handicrafts, from
Right.
village to village, are accepting payments via Easy Paisa or Jazz Cash now.
Yeah.
So you know, as long as somebody has a CNIC, and what you can do is sort of link it up to, if you've seen that we've got very successful models of having temporary cards, like in the
US,
West
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
particular.
yeah. You take
So
a
you
card,
can get, even in Dubai, you can get
Yeah.
like a, you know, like a prepaid sort of card.
True.
You get a card, you top up the money, and that's
And that's it, use
and
it.
now we've got, you know, a smartphone penetration has increased exponentially. So we've got more than 60% penetration of smartphones throughout the country. So, you know, we can put in QR codes. There are a lot of solutions that can be done. However, what needs to be worked on is the infrastructure. So yes, the private sector is stepping in, but you know, we need to make sure that there's internet outages are controlled. When the floods come in, you know, there's no signal for
Oh,
a
yes.
really
Yeah,
long time.
true.
So, you know,
Ex-
that's another issue.
Exactly, and thank you so much for, you know, touching upon that
Right.
as well. Once again, I'll come back to you as well, you know, because with the technology aspect, you know, you're more suited, you know, alhamdulillah, you guys work together. Now imagine that in the rest of the world, wherever we go, we do say, you know, see how there's Apple Pay, you know, on the tap of the phone, you can do payments. You know, that card example is one, you know, where you buy a $5 card and put as much money as you want to in it as well, and they know, you know, where the person's spending. There's a lot of tracking goes into it as well, and I think it's good for governments to keep the data. But if we are to talk about the recent e-commerce trends, what sort of financial platforms will provide us better opportunities for financial inclusion?
So I believe, Shahzad, that this is a pain point we are facing right now, and the thing is that we work with the e-commerce and also with the gaming industry.
Yeah,
And the
it's a
major
huge
issue,
industry
it's
though.
a huge industry and it has a lot of things. But the thing is that government policies need to be well versed, not haphazard. Because now, for the last 3 months, the direct payments for the e-commerce and for the gaming industries have been blocked by the payment gateways. Just because a certain payment gateway powered by the government needs to be promoted, because once you need to build that confidence, and then the step 2 should be taken. For a reason, we are in touch, you know, and emphasizing and making a policy that in fact invite your local, you know, e-payment gateways, and you know, it's a 8th largest industry. E-commerce is the 8th largest industry in the entire world, and look at the gaming
Trillion-dollar
industry.
yeah.
Seriously. So I think having the right approach, the modern approach, because these are not sort of the people who are coming from the conventional job
True.
perspective. They have a different mindset.
And how do you think that, you know, our universities can actually help us as well? Now imagine that for those 5 to 6 years that we have spent our university, you know, the fee were being deposited by our parents, the fee slip need to go to our parents as well. And I think that universities can come up with such a model where students are being trained on how to use financial services as well. Probably, you know, they can do it by themselves, send a receipt to
Absolutely.
their parents, send a copy and whatnot, and they will already be a part of that system. But very quickly towards the end, one more thing, and that is that we do see a lot of institutes, you know, offering such diplomas and whatnot, that you do this, do that and whatnot, and you will have a skill set to yourself. Now imagine that we do get the skill set, but unfortunately not having an NIC, not having an account, you certainly won't be getting any deposit, or because, you know, these companies won't offer you any cash payments, right? They will be like, okay, you need to have a bank account. A lot of people suffer through these issues where they have to get payments into somebody else's account and whatnot. So the entire ecosystem gets haphazard for them. So how do you think that, do you have a solution for that?
Yes. So one of the solutions, and you asked about one of the trends, is that I see emerging is the buy now, pay later model.
Yeah.
So we've
That's
seen
a bad
that.
model though for
Yeah,
us.
I know,
You know,
but,
we get so much stuff, but then we are unable to pay. That's the problem.
yes, but that doesn't mean that we should stop empowering people. So I think we should start small. So if somebody comes in, you know, with the need of, you know, they're trained in financial inclusion, the person wants to open an e-commerce store
Yeah.
online. They don't necessarily need a full-fledged laptop costing 70,000 rupees. They can start off with a 20,000 rupee phone as well, and that's perfectly fine. People are doing it all over with these delivery
True.
services as well, where they're operating home-based kitchens. So start small, so the risk is smaller as well. And then the other solution that I personally propose is that we need to somehow sort of educate people to the extent that the youth in particular, so starting from the age of 14, 15, 16, need to be exposed to these kind of models. How do you manage your cash?
True.
You know, women make great homemakers, but how many of them are teaching their sons to budget the house? You know,
Yeah.
yes, we're teaching them to become good men and go earn money, but you know, the way women manage the house, the budgeting aspect of things, paying back, how do you take a loan, what does it mean, you know, what does an interest rate mean? And when the youth, I saw this great initiative the other day where, you know, there's this local brand that's actually offering loans to students who want to go study at some of the top universities but do not have the financial, you know, freedom to go study there. And they're offering them, you know, the student loan model. And I think that's brilliant because, you know, when the student who's 17 or 18 gets into this habit, I'm studying right now, I'm getting this skill set, but I also need to pay off.
I think
I
it's
think
it's a wonderful
right.
skill set as well, and it's a need of the hour. And I think this is what I'm doing with my daughter these days as well. So, you know, so her
Right.
pocket money is somewhere around 4 or 5,000 rupees a month, and you know she's supposed to kind of make sure that she writes down whatever she's getting, and then you know towards the end, because just yesterday she came and she was like, okay, my next pocket money is due, and I was like, okay, you know, give me the details.
The month has
And I
came,
think it
right?
was beautiful, you know, because for her to know that, you know, that she needs to spend within 5,000 rupees, she cannot overdo it as well. But thank you so much, ladies,
Thank
for
you so
being with
much.
us.
Most
Thank
Lovely
you
to
so
be in
much.
conversation with you, and for the buy now and pay later technologies, whichever is coming in. I think it needs to be for the necessities of life, may it be medical, may it be education, such things where you're stuck up in life, you know, you call your friends, they ditch you as well, you know, so you certainly need some help. I think it will be helpful for that. We're heading out towards a short break. Don't go anywhere. When you guys come back, let's talk more about flooding and how we can give relief to people. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome back, and before going on to the break, we were having a wonderful conversation hinged around the concept of financial inclusion and how important it is, with the concept linked to the registration of the citizens across Pakistan, and that is the registration in the NADRA and the CNIC that they are granted. So we further want to develop this conversation, which is hinged around the concept that how disasters can be averted, and when we talk about state taking care of its citizens and making sure that the underprivileged, the marginalized are also catered to, they're also looked after in terms of the being most vulnerable, and they're living in that conflict area. So how can we tend to them, or disaster prone area, particularly when we talk about the climate induced disasters? How can we look after them, and how to develop the research which can actually help them on the ground? So to further dissect this conversation and dissect the concept of the disaster management, we are very glad that we have been joined by someone who happens to be an expert in the disaster response. He is Mr. Waqar Shirazi. Assalamu alaikum, Waqar, and thank you so much for joining us.
Walaikum assalam. Many thanks indeed for having me on the show.
Right. So, Mr. Waqar, we've seen that, and you have immense role you have played, and especially when we talk about National Socio-Economic Registry. So, please help us dissect this concept, how it is linked to the disaster management, and how important it is to have an underground or the research on the ground to make sure that the people who are marginalized communities, who are underprivileged, and we've seen that in Pakistan almost for consecutive years, we've seen that how monsoon is wreaking havoc across the country. They are well looked after, they are catered, and we develop some climate smart and resilient strategies out there.
Well, it is very simple. We know that through the National Socio-Economic Registry, we have a national database which includes all the socio-economic variables and profiling of the people at household level with their socio-economic context and with their poverty conditions. As you have mentioned that there are marginalized groups throughout the country, which happens to be in every country of the world. And these marginalized groups are less resilient towards calamities, towards disasters, because they have uh, uh, not in terms only in terms of infrastructure, but in terms of the economic resilience, they are quite weak. to respond towards the natural calamities. So, in this regard, while having a database of the marginalized groups throughout the country and having a digital channel to provide them with cash assistance provides the government with an ability to immediately and quickly respond to any of the natural calamity throughout the country with just clicks of a few buttons. Since
I'm
there
really
is a
sorry to barge in. You know, there's this one question which bugs me all the time, and that is that for the last 10 years we've been seeing, you know, concurrent flooding. You know, we have seen that every single year. This is the same thing that we go over every year around. And what my question stands is that why do you think that we really cannot have a preempt approach? You know, why do we always have to go or probably help people right after the flooding has taken place? Why haven't we figured out a database which tells us that, hey, you know what, if we move, you know, those people from those groups to these places, we might protect them rather than going after and then helping after flooding or giving them cash assistance?
well, we have to have a contextual understanding to understand this question. There is a complex situation. Pakistan is a country bursting with the population, and our population density, that is our inhabitants per square kilometer area, has been significantly increasing over last few decades. We have not only been habitating the flood basins, but we are also habitating the river beds, which are the natural flow areas of the river. So whenever the river reflect their natural flow in monsoon season, there has been news that so many lands have been flashed out and so many households have been flashed out. One of the reasons is that we have been making habitats in the riverbeds. That is again because of bursting population. And there is no mechanism that can generate an alarm that people can evacuate because it is people's choice that they are living in a particular vicinity. So we
Don't you
cannot
think that
force
this is
people
where the
because of
local
the
governments really
different
need to play a role?
variables.
Sorry, Bakar bhai, but don't you think that this is where the local government needs to play a role as well? We have seen multiple videos, you know, from Naran and Kagan where hotels were built on the same places and then unfortunately with flash floods, you know, there was nothing left and then the same hotels were built. You know, we have seen a lot of encroachments, not just, you know, even in the provinces, I think in the federal city of Islamabad, you know, in E11, I still remember there was a cloud burst, you know, there was a collapse of the house as well because of the streams as well. Now imagine if we are speaking about habitats being, you know, emerging, you know, within the riverbeds, obviously I think that's where the local government needs to play a role and how are those people allowed to kind of build their houses on top of the riverbeds?
There is no doubt about that. There are many of the missing links on government's behalf, especially on behalf of the local governments, in terms of implementing the bylaws that has been approved by the local governments, which reflect on many of the incidents happening in monsoon season throughout the country. There are electric trippings, there are electric currents and shocks
Yep.
to the people. There are many casualties because of the electric shocks. There are flash floods sweeping the infrastructure, not only the riverbeds, but let me share that in few of the areas of Pakistan, we have been observing that there have been some of the houses and some of the infrastructures within the flood-drain areas. So that is one of the largest reasons why our casualty and why our losses rate is too much high, not only in terms of kettles, but in terms of infrastructure and in terms of losing the valuable human lives. There is
Exactly.
no doubt about that.
And Bakar bhai, I would certainly want to move on towards the other side of the picture. Now, obviously, with climate change, we do see how the trends are changing, and with whatever way the flood was used to come, you know, it's a different pattern all of a sudden now. You know, with database of people who are more vulnerable and are not resilient, it's good. But do we have any database which actually kind of tells us how to forecast and what sort of floods can we expect in next years as well, so that we can do or take the preempt measures?
And I think I would like to club my question with Shehzad because he has asked beautifully about the sort of research that needs to go on the ground and making sure that they are documented, those communities, the underprivileged, the marginalized communities that are hit by this climate disaster. So your profile very brilliantly mentioned that you have already worked on the citizen damage compensation program, also known as Watan Kar in 2010 floods, right? So you have done research, a survey survey and you have profiled the people who were damaged by that. Do you think that contribution in the literature or the study can help you or help the state out in terms of providing the compensation to the damaged communities? And we've seen that the what do you call the water river is almost the same, right? The way of the water is almost the same when we talk about the flooding. So how can that research contribute in this current context?
The disaster-induced, the climate-induced calamities would be more rapid in Pakistan. It is a known fact. Everyone knows that the climate-induced calamities would now on be more rapid.
Yes.
We observed flood in 2010, and then we observed massive floods in 2022, and the torrential rains and the cloudburst are more rapid in Pakistan, which is obviously the climate-induced calamity, and Pakistan is one of the frontline countries facing the challenge of climate-induced calamities. Are we prepared enough? The answer is no, but we have touched some of the corners. As you have mentioned, that there is a population burst in Pakistan, and in 2010 we observed massive floods in Pakistan. But Pakistan introduced a very comprehensive program to cope up with the situation and to respond to the losses observed by the massive floods by the masses. And in this regard, Pakistan was the first Asian country who used the geographical mapping and then the socio-economic profiling together to identify those households who were there in flood affected areas. And they were the households of poor segments, the marginalized groups, the people pertaining to the lower two poverty quintiles. And how did we do that? It was first a geographical targeting, then that is by the satellite maps, we observed that which are the waterlogged areas or which are the areas affected by the flash floods in Pakistan. And then in those particular areas, we identified those households which were from the poor segments of the society. And with this combinational approach, that is the geographical mapping and poverty mapping, we perfectly identified those households which were more vulnerable and which were definitely affected by the floods.
And sir,
And
if we were able to figure out that,
yeah,
which households were most affected by floods, because I do know for a fact, when we go to our rural places, we have seen that, how people are not willing to move away from their ancestors' place, So for all of that land that they have inherited from their ancestors, they would never want to abandon it. Do you think that government can devise a policy where, for example, if 500 square meters of land is being taken for their safety and it should be moved to another place where they would feel safer and would be a better place for them to live and they won't be vulnerable anymore? Do you think that the government's working on this model as well? So please make sure that other than displacement, rather we are moving them towards another place which will be their ownership.
well, most of the time, Shehzad, we continue on blaming the government that government is not doing enough
We're not
for
blaming.
policy
I'm just
making.
asking if there's a
Yeah,
policy of such sort.
it's just my view that
Yeah.
let me build some of the scenario. We keep on blaming the government that government is not giving enough policy, government is not enough with the disaster response tools and capacity of disaster response. But you're very right that there is a part which has to be
Addressed.
shared by
Yep.
the masses in Pakistan, and that is the response towards the suggestions of the government. It has been observed most of the times that in many of the areas where flood warnings have been given 1 or 2 days or even a week prior to the actual floods happening over there, the people were not ready to move. They were not ready to move their cattle. They were not
Yep.
ready to move their family from those areas, and resultantly, uh, uh, increased number of casualties were observed in those areas.
True.
I think that we'll have to have a comprehensive awareness program through the within the mosques and build some of the confidence that if any such advisory appears by the government, people will have to reflect upon the advisory, and
And
uh, it is their social responsibility to follow the recommendations by the government.
True.
Even it is the local government or be it the provincial or the federal
And
government.
Waqar, by the necessity of this conversation, you highlighted a very unfortunate but important point, which is that unfortunately we have to live with these climate-induced changes and especially the disasters that are in the future that are going to come in. So how important do you think it is to invest in the early warning systems, like Shehzad mentioned, like you also alluded to your conversation? What is state doing and how much invested we are as a nation, as a state, in the early warning detection systems? Because obviously whenever there's a flooding coming in, we need to inform those communities which are living those in the near to or proximate to those areas where there's a warning, where it is near to the barrage of the water that is going to come in. And what modern technologies do you think we can apply in making sure that the communities who are living around those areas are not just told about that there is an impending flood that is going to come, but they also make sure that the damage can be minimized as much as possible?
Well, I think that enough modern technology is there. The anticipation of weather is no longer a challenge for the world. And there has been multiple satellites providing the images not only of Earth, but providing the images of low pressure building in many areas of the world. And there can be precise and there can be accurate or near to accurate anticipation of torrential rains in any area of the world. Not only the rains, but the other calamities, excluding at the moment earthquakes. I think that enough anticipation mechanism is there, and there has been anticipation by provincial disaster management authorities and national disaster management authorities. But the missing link is the trust of the people on any of the advisory. And to
Exactly.
build this trust, I think we can couple and we can add, along with the conventional tools like the conventional media, we can use the loudspeaker of masses, the local religious clerics, the local notables to
Yes.
disseminate this message to masses because people trust their message. And
Thank you so
if the
much.
message is disseminated,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Waqar bhai, because of the, this is how Haja would love to state it, because of the paucity of the time. Thank you so much for wrapping it up this beautifully, that, each and every member of the society and community really needs to play a role, from being an individual, a landowner, to the clerics of the mosque, everybody needs to come together, may it be the local government, may it be the provincial, and may it be the federal as well. Everybody needs to come together. But very quickly, I think what I'm going to kind of how I would want to wrap it up, and it's my opinion, Haja, you can second it if you feel like, and that is that one of the most I think bigger problem over here is that that people certainly are not willing to move whenever the alarm system actually kind of indicates them that, hey, what, it's about time that you move. They won't move their cattle, they won't go anywhere, and it feels like as if they're insecure about the relation they have with the local government, that God forbid they might not get land anywhere else, and that their ancestral land will be taken away. I have seen PDMs, NDMs do some amazing work, but their strategy is not preempt. I think what we really need to kind of work towards is making sure that all of these efforts and initiatives to be taken before time rather than post flooding or post such disasters as well. This is one recommendation, and each and every person, may it be the local government individuals, may it be the assistant commissioner, may it be the deputy commissioner, everybody needs to come together and have more awareness about the flora and fauna of that particular area, because most of the times when you get permissions to build whatever you want to build, and that too upon your own choice, you certainly won't care about how things were. So everybody needs to be more aware about
And
it.
echoing what Shehzad said and adding to this conversation is that I think we also need to empower the communities out there, because once the floods hit in, or unfortunately if there is any disaster of any other sorts, so the first responder towards that disaster is the community in itself, right? Obviously it takes times for the state officials to reach there, it takes times for the emergency help to reach there, but the community that is there is the first responder. So how can we empower them to make sure that they respond to the disaster in a more climate resilient manner, or in a more effective manner, so that the damage can be minimized? So this is how we can have this conversation, and we would further like to have this debate build around, but not for today because we are done for that. So thank you so much for joining us, Waqar Saab, once again, and for having this wonderful conversation. And until next time, it's a goodbye, Allah Hafiz, and good morning.
Good morning. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you so much.